The other thing too, I wanted to mention is you have a couple scenes here. Let me see, with Morgan and Guinevere, where it sort of reminds me of an expanded version of the scene in Another Woman where the Jenna Rollins character interacts with her sister-in-law,
Yeah.
and you gradually get to know more of their dynamic and her relationship with her brother. This one sort of reminds me of that, where there's lots of passive aggressive comments here and there. Morgan seems to have a bit of resentment towards Guinevere too, when it comes to her dalliances. When it was really a dalliance, as Guinevere points out. But I found their relationship fascinating as well. Talk a little bit about that, because there's one point where Guinevere corrects Morgan when Morgan calls them sisters, and Guinevere corrects them. It's a key moment and says that we're sisters-in-law.
Hmm. Well, I think you're thinking of Morgause, which is the older of Arthur's sisters. Morgan is the younger of the sisters. It's Morgause
Oh, it's Morgoth?
yeah,
Okay.
Morgause and Guinevere have the more tense relationship. Morgan Le Fay, I don't sketch out as much in these plays. She has a few good scenes over the 5 plays. Maybe 3 times she's got a scene where she has some major speaking roles. Morgause is in a sense, she's the evil bitch of this quintet, and Guinevere is the heroine. Although Guinevere is certainly a flawed character, she's not some ideal chaste virgin, and nor should she be. And throughout the whole series here, that's one of the things I wanted to do. I think I mentioned, and I think in each of the intros to the play, or the talks about the scene setting, that this is sort of Cassavetes and Camelot. Now, there's more humor than in your typical Cassavetes film, but there's a lot of really gut-wrenching stuff there, and you get that passive-aggressive stuff between Guinevere and Morgause because uh, you know they are the 2 closest women probably to Arthur, the wife and the sister that he didn't find out about until afterwards, and we find out reasons why. But there is going to be some natural tension there. She had, we know Arthur in a sense seems to be a fraud because he's not really of royal birth, but he's been granted that as he was elected, so he has been made royal, and then he basically has Morgause supplant King Lot and his sons, and they don't seem to particularly care or mind. And Guinevere is someone who was basically just, I guess, some pretty maiden, the fairest in the land kind of thing, that caught Arthur's eye, and he ended up marrying her. But they do make a good couple, I think, and you'll see throughout the whole 5-place sequence they are, in a sense, a typical married couple. They banter and bicker with each other, but there is a true deep love there. Dagonet, I think, this is the play where he really established. He has a couple of minor scenes in the first play. He doesn't really appear in the second play, but the play 3, 4, and 5, he's one of the major characters that is developed, and his relationship with Guinevere, you'll see when you read play 4, is really, we get a great sense of it. His expansion as a character aids in the expansion of Guinevere that is begun here, really in earnest.
As I said too, we find out Azrael killed the terror beast,
Yeah.
Or at least he says he did, and Sir Gawain accepts that. That's narratively, like I said, it sort of reads more like a long novel because of that detail put in there. You're constantly reconsidering your opinions of these characters. What do you think of that? I also find these Camelot plays very, very Wellesian, in the sense that they're modernizing a very archaic universe, the same way that Wells did with Shakespeare.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, there are some archaic phrasings. Sometimes a character will say, well, what be that or something. But it's very lightly sprinkled in here just to give a little sense of it. And these characters are to be redeemed in a sense by being modernized, that they're not just archetypes, that they were real, breathing flesh and blood creatures, and they do have their flaws. This watcher is watching over them. How much, is he really the author? Is he controlling all the strings? I think this is the play with the end where Azrael and Gawain are being told about the tournament, the jousting tournament, by the barkeeper, right?
Let me see here.
At the
At the
end,
end,
yeah. Is that this play, or is that maybe that's
uh,
play 4?
I'm
That
not
might be play
certain.
4.
I remember it ended with the different voices and the watcher
Right.
talking with the
So
audience.
that's probably play 4 is the one that I end with them jousting, then or talking about the jousting tournament. But um, yeah, you the relationships. This whole series. I subvert different relationships and move them around. I deepen some characters like Guinevere by expanding Dagonet. When you read the fourth, uh, well, I think this, because I don't think, no, it must be at the end of this one. Let me see here. Um, Find, let's edit. No, I think this is the play that, I can't do it without screwing up the screen here, but I think this is the play where Azrael and, well, let me see in the beginning here. It would be the barkeep should appear in the cast of characters. Let's see, because the fourth play is just, let's see, do I have the barkeep in this play? Yeah, the barkeep, a nondescript white male. So yeah, so this is where Azrael, and I think that's probably the best non-female scene, where you have Azrael and Gawain, and they're asking about the tournament. In the tournament that both Gawain and Azrael have missed, the jousting tournament, we find out that the winner was Sir Eric, and Sir Eric has always been he there are a number of knights that were very big in early romances and early poems. Sir Eric was one of the big ones. Eric and, what is it? Eric, oh, Eric, no, it was not Enid. Eric had his own major poem. I forget the name of his lover, but they got pushed aside by Launcelot and Galahad, which were later additions. Tristram, we find Tristram is basically a himbo, basically here. He's not he's probably even a little bit duller than what's his McCall Launcelot. But then Tristram ends up losing to Eric, and so in the 5 plays, there's only one recounting of a jousting tournament, and it's won by a knight that we never see. We only hear. We hear about Eric's and how Eric not only won the tournament, but he did it by unseating 4 or 5 knights in a row in just 4 or 5 passes, which is unheard of. It's like when you're jousting, you're running with your spears or your whatchamacalls, and you knock the other guy off the horse. Never before had anyone done 4 straight times and won a tournament. And so this is seemingly the most Arthurian feat of grandeur that you could think of, and yet all it is basically the gossip of a couple of nights drinking and a barkeep telling them the gossip as though he was recounting the World Series or the Super Bowl. And so that brings down that whole mythos, and it's the scenes with characters like Dagonet and Guinevere, or Guinevere and her mixture with Iseult, or Morgause and her constant. We know, and by this play, we know that there's something not right with Morgause. We know that she doesn't like Camelot, and we know that she is the mother of Modred. And in the next 2 plays, we'll find out the reasons why she is the way she is and why Modred is the way he is.
There's also an early scene with the Watcher where he says that he was the dog Myrtle, that he is all things in all ways in this universe. I thought that was another interesting touch. It's a sort of a Whitmanian idea that he could be all things. And he later is talking to, and I think through the audience towards the end of this play. But talk a little bit about that aspect too. Do you recall the Myrtle scene with the dog Myrtle?
Dog Myrtle. What happens with the dog
That's
Myrtle?
where the Watcher says that she's trying to recount exactly because the Watcher says that he has encountered Guinevere before, and she starts to recount her life and realizes the Watcher was the dog Myrtle at the time.
Oh, see, there's a scene that I've
But
forgotten. So,
yet the Watcher says to remember her eightness.
okay, well, yeah, and that's one of the things that I do in a lot of novels and whatnot is I'll have these little scenes, and it's interesting because they don't stick out with me when I put them in there. But there are things that oftentimes I will have I will have someone email me about, and maybe someone bought my plays on the Great Khans, and they'll, instead of talking about the want was of the Crow or the Woman in White, they'll focus on some brief little exchange or something. So that's one of those things that's interesting as to what sticks with someone and what doesn't stick with someone. So that's one of the reasons to throw in these little realistic moments, and that's a very Cassavetes thing too. Is that Cassavetes, if you go even in his lesser films, someone like something like Husbands or
None of the influence.
yeah, well, that's not really a lesser film. That's I was thinking of the one where he has the two names in it. I forget the names of the two characters, but anyway, even in those films that aren't his best stuff, there are little moments that are gems that stick out, and that's always a good thing to have in art, is to have those little moments that will affect someone, because even if they are to you a throwaway moment as the creator, it might mean something uh, that resonates emotionally with someone simply because it has that emotional connection, that emotional bearing.